It's been a few weeks since our workshops together on minding the generation gaps, and I thought I'd just give you a little bit more insight and follow up on some questions and comments that a few of you have made. Thank you very much for sending those through. I'm not sure if you wanted them to be anonymous or not, so I won't mention any names, but hopefully I'll answer all the questions that were asked. And this few minutes that you can give me in this video will be hugely helpful for you for taking this idea of generational theory, of generation gaps, and making it really practical and applicable in your team and your work environment. I've got two reminders and then a few tips for you, especially and mainly focused on how to engage with the younger generations in our teams. That seemed to be a theme in your questions. So first of all, the two reminders to you. I'm sure you got this, but let's just be clear about it. The first reminder is that generational theory is a generalization, and it can be hugely dangerous to just apply it like a hammer trying to find a nail to hit. You can't just say, because you are 23 years old, you must then fit into this little Gen Y, Gen Z, millennial box, whatever the label is. And equally so, you can't just say, okay, boomer. Obviously, these are generalizations. And the value of generalizations, whether they are personality profiles or even racial and cultural stereotypes, the value of them is that when we don't know somebody, it gives us a very good place to start. The downside is that you should get to know people and treat them as individuals. So the goal of using generational theory is not to just apply it blindly, but to use it when maybe you're struggling, when maybe you feel that there's a disconnect between you and your team or you and somebody else, or maybe when you're coming up with the general framework for maybe a product launch, or you're trying to engage with a new idea around customer service or something like that. So you don't have a particular person in mind, but you're trying to think in generalizations. Then generational theory is a very, very good place to start. The second reminder is that it applies differently in different contexts. And here I specifically mean two things. Different countries are going to have slightly different generations. This is because the generations are not actually defined by age. They are defined by the era you were born in. Different countries, and as we looked at the different countries, especially across Africa in our workshops, we saw that there were slightly, for example, most other African countries have a moment of independence from their colonial powers. And that typically defines the boomer generation from the other generation. So the boomer generation is the generation defined by that independence moment. In South Africa, though, that's not true. In South Africa, the baby boomers were those people who were born in the sort of mid-50s to 70s, I'd argue right the way up to 1976. But then that wasn't an independence moment for South Africa. Obviously, South Africa then went into the 1990s. So South Africa has a smaller Generation X component with a bigger boomer and a bigger millennial component. Again, I'm not going to go into details. You're welcome to contact me if you'd like some more specific insights for your country. But just remember that you can't just pick up a textbook or look on a website when somebody's referring to boomers from America or from Australia or from South Africa and think it applies in the same way in every other country. And similarly, it also doesn't apply the same in the suburbs and the townships, in the rich areas and the poor areas. This is very much a sociological theory, and like most sociological theories, it applies mainly to the middle class. Once people have gotten over, if we think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, once people have gotten over those base level of needs, they then begin to exhibit some of the characteristics you'd see in some of these theories like generational theory. But people who live in township poverty and in rural poverty across Africa, we'd be careful to apply generational theory to them. Okay, so with those caveats, actually more than reminders, let's then jump into a few additional practical ideas. And here I'm going to particularly focus on Generation Y and what we know about the younger generations, whether we call them the millennials or Generation Y. This is your 20-somethings, even possibly early 30-somethings, your new graduates, the youngest members of your team at the moment. And here's the list that I put up towards the end of the workshop, and maybe just dive into a few of these, and then I want to just extract 3 or 4 very specific things that will be useful for you. I think maybe the 2 overarching themes that I can throw in here would be that this is a generation that is very used to structure. In their schooling environment and in the parenting style that they were raised in, they lived very structured lives. It's not like 30, 40 years ago where basically the kids were on their own every afternoon and you kind of just got on with it. Again, we're talking here, as I said, sort of more middle-class type of society, but probably the type of people who've ended up working in your teams. They were a lot more structured. They maybe were structured because their parents put them in front of TV or computer games rather than just letting them run wild in the neighborhood. Maybe they were more structured because that's how school has moved these days. A lot more structured, both in terms of how you learn things, but also just in the day. There's just so much that gets fitted into a school day and a school week and a school term these years. And similarly at university, the style of education now is a lot more focused. We get told what to learn, we get prepared for the exams better, and we get through. There's no whining or complaining. You shouldn't hear that in my tone of voice. It just is the way that it is. But what it means is that this generation have this veneer of confidence. They come across as if, I don't need any help at all, but they're not very good at asking for help when they need it because they're kind of waiting for the structure to appear. And if you're not planning on giving them structure, well, then where's it going to come from? So give them more structure than you think they need, especially if you are a Generation Xer. If you are sort of in your 40s or early 50s or so, you may feel you're doing your best leadership job of taking your hands off and giving them complete freedom. Actually, you're not. They need structure. What do I mean by structure? Tell them what needs to be done, when it needs to be done by, give them some examples of how it should be done, maybe a template to help them. Don't micromanage them, but do check in on them every now and again. Not every few hours, maybe not even every few days, but depending on the project, make sure you've got maybe more milestones than you would consider absolutely necessary, and a little bit more information maybe than you consider absolutely needed. Which leads into the second overarching theme, which I think will be really useful, and that is that this generation, these younger people, really work better when they know why. When they know why something needs to be done, that's when they respond. If they don't know why they're doing it, they're not going to give you their best. And when I speak to them as young people and graduates, I say to them, this is not like a 4-year-old where you go, why all the time. But do ask why. Do ask your boss, why must this be done? Why must it be done by Friday? Why must I do it? Why must it be done in this way? Not, as I say, as a 4-year-old, but so that you can extract that structure and you understand where you fit into the system. So all of that is about giving them training, giving them ongoing feedback, not once a year reviews. Throw those out the window. Really, waste of time as far as they're concerned. Give them that structure and guidance and coaching and so on. Right, what else have we got here? I think the rest of these make sense. Now, I want to pick up 1 or 2 things. This issue of flexibility is absolutely essential. And here I want to quote one of my favorite authors. He's the author of a book called Think Again, and a new book is coming out, or probably by the time you watch this has already come out. Adam Grant. Highly, highly, highly recommend him. I think he's a Wharton professor of psychology, and he calls himself the psychologist of the future of work. Love it. Follow him on the socials as well. He's brilliant. And here's a quote that I saw him put up, and I agree with him completely. When people say they want flexibility, and today's younger people do say they want flexibility, what they don't really want necessarily is to work from home or set their own hours. I know that's what he's said here, but what he's saying is they want autonomy. What they want is to be able to say, I don't want to be stuck in your version of an office day and a work day. I want to have some of that flexibility. Yes, I understand there might need to be core hours. Yes, I understand there might need to be times I come to the office. But what I want is for you to trust me, big word, trust me to organize my life in order to do the things you're expecting me to do. Now, in there, I could give you an hour-long presentation on this. There's an outputs-based working environment conversation to be had. There is a conversation here about giving people a sense of mastery, and once people have got a sense of mastery and you're confident in their mastery, then you can give them that autonomy. So once you know that somebody can do the job, then you've got to trust them to organize their day, their week, their life in order to give you the output you're looking for most. This issue of autonomy, I think, is one of the biggest issues we're going to face over the next 2 to 3 years. And if I can be very, very specific about this, in particular, it's got to do with the way that we think about the office. And here's a nice phrase that might be useful to you. The office is a tool. It's not a destination. Too many companies, too many senior leaders are desperately trying to get all of their teams back to the office, but on very, very flimsy excuses. The right word is excuses. They say it's for collaboration. They say it's for team dynamics. And then everybody comes to the office and there's no collaboration or team dynamics going on at all. You can only fool some of the people some of the time, as they say. And again, today's young people want to know, if you want me at the office, let's be clear about what the reasons are. And if they're not good reasons, well, then we're not using the appropriate tool for the appropriate reasons. So it's not all just about hybrid working. It's not all about work from home or come to the office. Autonomy is bigger than that. It's also about how you set your office up when you're there. It's also about flexi working hours. There's all sorts of things, but at least that's a big part of the conversation. And this is more important than you can imagine in terms of staff engagement with the younger generation. Have the conversation with them. And then the final piece of the puzzle, we mentioned this, I think, only on 1 or 2 of the workshops during the Q&A time. But for me, this Japanese concept of ikigai, it's kind of like the fulfilled life. It's a difficult phrase to translate, but it's sort of the fulfilled life. I like this model, just to explain it. The baby boomers looked for a job that they would earn money in and that they were good at. Okay, and that's why they went for the professions: lawyer, doctor, engineer, accountant, actuary, vet, and architect. Off you go to university, live your life. And some of them live lives of quiet desperation, but they're making enough money to make up for it. So fantastic. Then Generation X, I think, added the idea of, I kind of want to enjoy it as well. And I think I should try and aim for a job where I can actually be paid for what I'm doing. I'm good at doing it, and I love it. And I think today's young people are adding a 4th dimension, which is the world actually needs it. There's a higher, a bigger purpose in that. Now, I know many baby boomers think, well, that's horribly idealistic. I mean, is it even possible to achieve? And I don't know if it's possible to achieve, but why shouldn't we at least try? And that's what today's young people are saying. They don't want to fit their lives around their work. They want their work to fit into their lives. And that's not just playing with words. That's not just playing with English. That's a mindset shift for this younger generation, that if we fail to recognize it, we will fail to attract and retain and engage our best young talent. And I think Ikigai gives us a way of thinking about this, and a way of offering some ways in which we need to work to our younger generations. So, again, there's probably a lot more that could be said, but I've already taken 15 minutes of your time, and I hope that this goes a step further for you. Maybe one last point is this, and that is you need to engage these young people. They love the experimental mindset, to try things, give it a go, see if it works. If it doesn't work, we try something else. They're very used to that in their lives, and maybe you bring that attitude into your team as well. If you have any further questions or would like to engage in thinking about generation gaps and how to overcome them and use the concept of generational theory to build a really great team and a future workplace, well, please make sure that you contact me, follow me, connect with me on all the social channels. I put resources like this out all the time, and I'd be happy to help you if I can. Thanks for your time, and all the best with building multi-generational workspaces and teams.